Hi everyone, I'm Aesah, and welcome to my guide on Trickshot Kaisa in set 11. At the time, I'm currently recording this in PvE. I haven't mastered this set yet, and balance is likely to drastically change, as well as the community just kind of figuring out how to play the set better before it goes live. So this is kind of based on just my thoughts mostly, and very limited gameplay experience on what I think the best builds will be for playing Kaisa. But again, these are highly subject to change, and we'll see if I'm right when the set goes live in about a week from today. Okay, so I made a written article. You guys can see this if you go to the site and click on meta.coms here, meta plus comps here. I just added this today, so I'm pretty excited about it. I only have 3 comps. I'm not going to add more until it goes live just because PvE balance is all over the place. But basically, this is kind of a core board you could have at level 8 without legendaries. Um, Kale, I think taking the attack speed one makes a lot of sense. To give more attack speed to Kaisa. Senna also gives attack damage to Kaisa. And Sivir and Loon also both give attack speed to Kaisa. So all 4 of your backline units here, including the Kale, are buffing your Kaisa with either attack speed or attack damage. Loon and Silas give Umbral, which is good frontline. And then otherwise you have 4 Bruiser, which should be a pretty strong frontline. So we'll see if this is a good comp. Ink Shadow, of course, is activated for your primary trait on Kaisa. You're getting that from Senna and Aatrox. And Trickshot, Kaisa's other trait, is activated with Sivir. So you have both Kaisa's traits activated, a lot of backline units buffing her, and a solid frontline. This is kind of what I think the comp should be played like. Notice Sivir is all adjacent units, whereas Kale and Senna have to be in the same row next to Kaisa. So that's why they're positioned like this. And yeah, let's talk about some items. So I threw in some items in here. I think the items that I showed are pretty close to best in slot, but as always, I'm kind of an advocate of just slamming whatever items you get. If you get Deathblade, Hurricane, Giant Slayer, any of these, I think I would happily slam them. I think some items that are probably not going to be good are Rageblade and Shojin. Kaisa's an attack damage champion. Historically, Shojin and Rageblade are usually not that good. Rageblade can be good, but Kaisa in particular has a very long ultimate animation. If you play this unit, you'll notice that. Her ultimate takes a really long time compared to other units to cast, which tends to make Rageblade not that good because Rageblade really benefits when you can spend a lot of time auto-attacking. If you do have the AD Ink Shadow ones, I think you can't get them from 3 Ink Shadow, but obviously you're not going to have this exact board every time. You might have an Ink Shadow emblem and then try to fit in 5 Ink Shadow over something. If you have Fury or Bombardment, those are really good on Kaisa. Toxin, I think, is okay. If you don't have a third Kaisa item, then by all means put on Kaisa. You can always pop it off very easily by benching her. But Toxin, I think, is not quite as good as a lot of the craftable damage items. As with every AD focus comp, you want Armor Shred somewhere in the comp, either Last Whisper or Even Shroud. Anti-heal is always nice to have. And then frontline items, anything can typically be fine. I just use these as an example to kind of mix it up. In the previous example, I use like Warmog, Stoneplate, like Steadfast Heart. Like these are all good. Steadfast Heart, I think in particular, maybe you don't want to build, not because it's not a good item, but because you want your gloves to be put on Kaisa. Crown Guard, Redemption, and Vow are pretty good frontline items to build. Like you don't want to be going for them off carousel, but you will have leftover tiers and rods, and it's better to use them than to, like make an Archangel's or a Loon. That's not going to do that much. Positioning, so as I mentioned earlier, she gains attack speed and AD from all of these units. Sivir can be in front, Kale and Senna need to be next to Kaisa, and Alun just needs to be same row. I'm kind of positioned for right side Umbral here. If you can kind of see the arc going like this is one of the Umbral patterns, so you're only wasting 1 slot here. Board examples, yeah, so the top board is just an example of what I think would be a really good board without legendaries, but you always have to kind of adjust to what you hit in PvE. I also want, in TFT, I also want to mention that currently in PvE, at the time I'm recording this video, Rakan is better than Xayah, but I mean, Xayah being the legendary trick shot and Kaisa being the trick shot, you would think they would go together. So I went ahead and included Kaisa as the core legendary that goes in this comp. So early game, this is one potential opener you can play into this comp. You can already see you have your Ink Shadow core set up here. Caitlyn gives Sniper with Senna and Ghost with Aatrox, so it's like a really nice 3 synergies activated with 4 units, and it has a really nice transition into level 5, where you can just add any Bruiser or Warden. If you have one of these upgraded or itemized, you'll usually want to activate the trait. Like for example, let's say we have 2-star Jax and our items on Jax, then we'll want to Warden, and then like vice versa, if we have items on Aatrox and 1-star Jax, Aatrox being a 2 cost is going to be a little stronger, so we might want to add a Bruiser. Same thing with backline. Like if we have 1-star, no Caitlyn pair, then maybe we want to itemize Senna. But the reason I have the items on Caitlyn is you're more likely to have like 2-star Caitlyn backline, and in that case you would want to itemize the Caitlyn. But yeah, having the 3 Ink Shadow here is really nice as this opener, because then you can like kind of progressively upgrade your board, whereas otherwise it can be kind of hard to pivot into it late game. Like you're not going to have like the 2-star Jax, you're not going to have the 2-star Aatrox, and these are pretty impactful. Like if you're rolling down on stage 4 and trying to hit this board, and then like you have to use some of the 1-star versions. I guess you don't use Jax, but let's say you have to use like 1-star Riven, 1-star Aatrox, and it's going to be a big factor. So here, for example, I added both the Bruiser and the Warden. So this is at level 6. I add the Story Weaver ones just because it kind of transitions into your future board, but you can use something like Gnar Rek'Sai. They'll also synergize and give you Dryad, but like this will kind of cleanly synergize into like level 7 as well. And you don't have to play exactly this. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video. Stage 4, so this is a board we saw at the top. Again, I already talked about this in great detail at the start of the video. Stage 5, so core legendaries I think are Udyr because he's Ink Shadow with Kaisa, and then Xayah with Trick Shot with Kaisa. So this is kind of how you can kind of like swap out. You can get out of Story Weaver. Late game, there's a lot of abilities that target largest clump. For example, like Nautilus ult, Azir ult, Hui ultimate, Morgana ultimate. A lot of these abilities are targeting largest clumps, so you kind of value declumping a little bit more in the late game. So you can kind of transition out of Story Weaver. You also don't want to be playing 1 cost in the late game, even though Sivir does give a really nice attack speed buff to Kaisa. You would rather play higher cost units. So this is like a potential board you can transition to. Ornn gives Behemoth with Udyr, and then your 1-2 Dryad, 1-2 Invoker. So the most like logical progression at level 9 is to add Azir. So these 2 boards are pretty similar. But again, this is just one example of what you might play at level 9. In your actual TFT games playing this comp, you might end up on this exact board, like much less than, in half your games at level 9. Because if you're rolling and you hit like, for example, a set 2, you're probably just going to want to play that. You can play it over a Loon, like Invoker is kind of whatever. And then maybe you'll want a Warden in that case instead of, potentially instead of like a Galio. So yeah, you just have to like play around what you hit, but these are just board examples. So let's talk about some more openers. I think openers are definitely very important. So if you want to build AD items, kind of working towards Kaisa, the AD 1 cost units you kind of want to carry are these. These guys are like AP units. They have very low base damage, so building AD items on them will not give you as much efficiency as these actual AD champions. In the 2 cost, Gnar, Senna are good AD holders, and if you absolutely have to, you can carry something like Riven. Like if you read her ability, she is doing AD damage, even though she is more of a frontliner. If you hit like a Riven 2, she could very well be your strongest item holder in the early game for AD. Same thing with units like Garen. If you hit like a Garen 2-star, then maybe you can hold AD items on him very temporarily. 3 costs, eventually we have like Aphelios, we have Yone, we have Tristana. You don't have to activate Reaper, especially with Yone, does not do that much. Sniper and Duelist are much more important, so if you do item hold one of these guys, I would try to optimize their synergy. But basically, these are going to be your early game AD item holders. I kind of already talked about the Sniper opener, but we could itemize our Sivir. We do want a Sivir kind of in our like stage 4 comp, but hopefully we can just either hold an extra copy or pivot out of Sivir on stage 3 at some point. Like, definitely do not be, if you have an upgraded Sivir in the early game, definitely don't be afraid to itemize her, knowing that you are going to have to sell her at some point. So I'll try to use some different items, for example, like Hurricane plus maybe, there's not that many amazing ones. Let's just say like Hurricane plus Giant Slayer, sure. So you could go for like a Story Weaver frontline here with Garen plus Riven plus one trick shot. So this could be like a potential opener you're playing, and then of course you can easily add in Bruiser or Warden as your frontline. I've been using Aatrox a lot because he kind of leads into Ink Shadow. He also has 3 traits, so he can kind of give you like an easy next in. Like, for example, you can add in Alawi, he'll give you 2 traits, he'll give you Warden and Ghostly. So this is just like a way you can kind of naturally progress your comp. Let's say you're carrying a 1-star Sivir still at this point, and then you hit something like Tristana. Well, then you don't need the Teemo anymore for Trick Shot. Now you can just play any Duelist. It doesn't have to be exactly Volibear, but Volibear is one of the best ones because he's a 3 cost. He's just kind of a strong unit as well early in the game compared to, for example, like if you play Yasuo, right? Like a Volibear is going to be stronger. And this is also kind of nice because with Aatrox, it's 2 out of 3 Ink Shadow, so that can kind of like naturally transition you. If you're kind of playing this as your stage 3 board and then you find a Kaisa, you can kind of just like naturally transition, get the Tristana out of here. Hopefully you find a Sivir back in, and as you can see, we kind of already are very close to our board. I've been putting Senna in because she buffs Kaisa, but it's like if you have a Volibear 2, you definitely don't need to play a Senna. Like, even if we hit a Senna 1, if we already have a Volibear 2, it might be better just to keep playing the Volibear. So then you can kind of like transition into a better board, like kind of slowly. And it doesn't have to be all at once, of course. Like if we hit Galio, we could just 1-to-1 bench Riven. We still want to keep our Riven because we might want to pivot into that 4 Bruiser. But this will kind of give you like some ideas of how to like progress throughout the game. Some other early game item holders, like you could have Kha'Zix. Reaper is not super important, but if you want to play Reaper, sure, you can play like Kindred. You can play Dryad or like Bruiser. And then of course we have both of our favorite Bruisers we've been using a lot. These 2. But if not, we can use Wardens as well. So to show you like so I can use Garen or Jax, and again, both of these will transition into that kind of board I showed at the very beginning, as it has both Story Weaver and Ink Shadow. So you can kind of do whatever you want here. It's pretty flexible for sure. We could even item hold Gnar if we hit early Gnar too. But yeah, those are some potential ways you can kind of open into this comp. It doesn't have to be anything super specific. Even if it's not Reaper, like you could just play like a Kha'Zix plus strong frontline. Like, let's say you just happen to hit like a Cho'Gath 2 Behemoth unit. Okay, well now maybe we can add Malphite, right? So you can kind of just go and like kind of like sequentially move through these things. Maybe we'll hit Yone, we add Reaper, and then maybe we'll want an Umbral unit. So then we can just add any of these Umbral guys, like this Yorick, for example, who's another Behemoth. Then maybe we'll add another Behemoth on level 6, for example, or maybe we'll want to transition out of Cho'Gath and then put in like a better unit there. So I also want to talk about some of the possible items. Frontline items, you typically don't want to use your gloves because they're pretty valuable on Kaisa. So like Val, Crown Guard, Adaptive, and Redemption are all going to be like really good options. Anti-heal is good, Sunfire is good, even Shroud is really good. those of you guys who played a lot of set 10 might be pretty familiar with prioritizing Even Shroud over Last Whisper. That's kind of because the way the Ezreal plus Zed comp worked is it relied on two separate AD carries, so that weren't necessarily attacking the same target. Ezreal also benefited a lot from his third cast ultimate, and Last Whisper would apply after he casts. So in a comp with multiple AD carries, Even Shroud is kind of nice, where it's like even if your AD carries are attacking different things, they could both be getting armor shred. But in this comp, if we kind of looked at the standard board I showed at the very start of this video, Kaisa is going to be your only real damage dealer. So Last Whisper has really good stats, so you could definitely go for Last Whisper. But again, you're not always going to get offered these items, so let's say you don't get offered any gloves, then by all means you can go Even Shroud. And then ideally you would have like, I think Kaisa does quite a lot of ultimate damage, so Infinity Edge is pretty good. But again, if you don't have it, it's fine. If you have something like, let's say you got a lot of bows this game, you went red buff, that's okay. Like, this is not going to be as good as like the Infinity Edge Last Whisper build, but again, it's completely fine. Gunblade is going to be fine as well. Ideally, you have a 3-item tank to take advantage of Gunblade. Gunblade is going to be better if your tank has a lot of resist, because then each point of healing is like more effective HP. Warmog is always good. And yeah, I mean, frontline items are pretty flexible. You can go quite a lot of different options. I guess I mainly want to go over some Kaisa items, but basically you just want a good mix of AD and attack speed. Kaisa doesn't naturally have either one really, but if you play the kind of board I gave you at the start, Sivir and Alune and Kayle will all give Kaisa attack speed. Senna will give Kaisa AD. So that'll kind of help you out until you can transition into those higher tier units and get more sources, more like secondary sources of damage. Potentially, who knows, like Xayah, Azir, even like Udyr or Set are potentially damaged, and then maybe you'll, if you're rolling down and you hit like a 2-star AP carry, you can definitely throw that in there. Like Lilia, for example, could be Invoker with the Alune. I don't know how to pronounce her name that we were playing earlier, but yeah. That's going to wrap it up for this video. If you have any questions, there's a discussion thread in the TFT Coaching Discord, so let me know there. Thanks for watching.